What's up, y'all? This is Jesse Warden. Today we're going to show, just kidding, tonight we're going to show how to do some screen transitions in Corona SDK. There is a storyboard API. It's actually created to handle this exact use case, and that is that you've built your game and now it's time for the GUI, and you're trying to do some screens or some menus, and these are not interface elements. These are like about, credits, things like that. It becomes quite challenging if you haven't done any GUI-based development where you're putting a significant amount of children within other forms and things like that. And I just wasn't really a fan of the storyboard API. I get what he did. It's a great concept from the fact that you can have a creation and destruction method, as well as starting to, when you build it, it's responsible. So you have a way to actually clean up your view when it goes away. And when you're on mobile constrained devices that have not a lot of RAM and not a lot of resources, that's a great habit to start from the get-go, right? And having that actually built into the native API is a great way to get people to start following it. If they don't know how, they feel compelled to learn. Works great in theory, but the whole concept of Corona was that you could quickly, build games, right? And build things quickly and fast and iterate. And a lot of screens just don't really need all that. Some can actually exist in RAM and it's fine. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If you go to coronalabs.com, we'll actually go to the docs, and I'll show you the API I'm talking about. It's a good API. I mean, I dig it. I wanted to show a simpler way, because there's a lot of people who are like, look, I don't even know what an API is. I don't know what methods are. This is hard. Help me, please. And I'm like, no problem. So let's check this out. All right, so we're at the docs, okay? So let's scroll down, and I'm going to show you the storyboard. Actually, here's an easier way. You just hit story, call it a day. So he's got a great API here for basically creating a series of screens. On screens, blah, 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 right? But I'm going to show you something a little simpler tonight, okay? So we're just going to make 3 screens. I'm going to swap through them, and you should have at least an idea of how to tween them in and out, the whole juice it kind of thing. So let's get started. So let's make some screens. So we'll open up Fireworks. All right, so we're going to go over here, and we're going to create a new set of Lua classes. So let's open up the code directory. All right, let's grab an existing config, which I believe it's probably Plain Shooter, I think, has a good one. Config, yeah, there we go. Let's paste it in. Save as our config. Put it in. All right, so this config will get us the 320 by 480 size. Let's pump the frame rate up just a little, since it's got to be 30 or 60, one or the other. And we'll make a new main Lua file. Save it as, yeah, I hate when it does that. Ugh. Main.lua. All right, cool. So we have our main Lua file, and we'll open it up inside the Corona terminal, which launches the Corona simulator. Make this a little bit bigger. At the bottom. This is kind of my preferred setup, by the way. Preferred layout. And since I'm using my work computer, I don't have my Corona license on this guy, but it still works. All right, open that directory. It's smart enough to open main. So there we go, right? Got our simulator going. Now, let's build an actual screen. So what is a screen really? To me, a screen is just a group of display objects. And when you want to move or transition mostly the whole screen, you just move that single group. And that moving that group will move everything in it. It makes the code really simple to read. It's very flexible because those groups, you can put whatever you want into them. You can position things where you want. But the actual screen itself can be or laid out however you want. So assuming you're okay with classes, I'm going to make one, and we're going to call it, and I'm not going to use packages for now, okay? I'm a big fan of packages, but to keep things simple, I won't. So let's call this the main screen. .lua, and we'll do main screen as an object or a table, whatever you want to call it. Then we'll create our constructor function, which is a convention I do of new. And we'll create our local instance object, in this case, which is a screen table. And don't forget to return it. So, class definition, right? Constructor function, instance you're actually going to return, and then methods on it. So what is show? We'll talk about show and hide. So the convention I follow is show and hide. Show and hide means all screens have some form of transitions that they themselves handle when they show, such as moving buttons in, fading in particular buttons to guide the user's eye to something or indicate something that's changed. So for example, a main screen might have the continue button look a little different if the user already has saved games, whereas if it's brand new, they'll highlight the new button, things like that. So same screen, but different behavior based on state in the app, things like that, right? Additionally, this has nothing to do with how you transition from one screen to the other. This is strictly just how the screen itself wants to show itself, okay? So if I was going to see a main screen, how would it be? So I'm going to keep the transitions light for now, but I'm going to at least show you what the convention is. And the reason this is important is that the Storyboard API, if you remember from yesterday, so if you remember, it actually has the ability to go to a particular screen, but load it and purge it, okay? So there's one thing about having screens in memory and showing and hiding them. It's another to actually purge them from memory or have them clean themselves up, remove references internally, etc. It's a little an advanced topic, but bottom line is Lua is a reference counting mechanism. So as many references as you can possibly remove, it makes it easier for the garbage collector to know, okay, I can get rid of these things. Sounds complicated. It is complicated. All you need to worry about is show and hide. You stick with that convention, trust me, you'll be good to go. If you ever need to debug memory leaks, you can probably find them in your hide method. Makes it simple, okay? So we're going to follow that convention, okay? The whole Ruby on Rails convention over configuration kind of thing. So for now, we're just going to do our own thing that has nothing to do with the Storyboard API. Show and hide, okay? So let's go back to Fireworks, check out our main screen. And it has 3 buttons, continue, new, and about, okay? So we want these kind of to like fly on the screen, like in a nice subtle way. So let's create them first. Now what I like to do is I like to have an init method. And this goes with the convention of constructors shouldn't do a lot of work. You should be able to create a class and it shouldn't have a lot of overhead simply creating it. What is the overhead is the class actually initializing itself or creating its children, things like that. Additionally, it makes it a little bit easier for them to test because you can create the class and not have it do a bunch of stuff, right? You can actually create it, verify the class can be created, then work on its dependencies. So it just makes it easier to test. I know it seems like a lot of stupid extra work, but trust me, I've been doing this long enough where it's nice to have things that are easy to debug from the get-go, okay? So we're going to create an init function, which is basically private, but for now we're not going to treat it as such. Init is kind of another, init or initialize, if you want to go with the whole readable code over hard read code. Initialize is kind of a convention I follow in just about any language where I want it to do a bunch of stuff. So I can create a main screen, but it doesn't show anything, it doesn't break. It's just a class, right? Initialize is where it creates everything. So let's create things. What are we creating, Jesse? Well, we're creating these 3 buttons, continue, new, and about, okay? So we'll go to continue and create a little factory function called getButton, and I'll show what that does in a second as we build it. So continue is self.getButton. Self is kind of like this in JavaScript. The colon just means retain scope. So if I use self, it's referring to this screen object. I could just as easily do screen. That'll work as well, but the method isn't as portable. And if you know anything about OOP or object-oriented programming, portability is awesome. All right, so we got a button, and we want to. Here, I'll do this first. So a normal button is something like this. It's a button. What's the image we're getting here for? Continue. Continue ping. So our get button will take an image, display self.new image. It'll take the image. It'll automatically add a method called touch. Touch is a reserved word, by the way, for event handlers. All buttons in Corona, whether they're images or shapes or whatever, if you want to hear about a particular touch on that particular object, the easiest way is to scope the method to it via using colon instead of dot, right? That gives it scope. It's very similar to delegate.create in ActionScript 1 and 2. It's also similar to bind in underscore in JavaScript if you're used to that. CoffeeScript does that as well when it compiles. So in this case, we're doing touch. We're going to get an event, which you usually don't care about, but we're just putting it there to be sticking with convention. And we'll go image add event listener, touch, and it's scoped to the image, and then we'll return the image. One thing this will do is call the self.onButtonTouched. It's actually not self. In this case, it is screen. So this is where we break the convention of self, because we have a method closure defined inside of a method closure, which is defined inside a method closure. Are you confused yet? All right. So that'll get us our buttons. We got a continue button, and we always do local variables inside of Corona and Lua in general, because locals, it's very similar to how you do vars in JavaScript or whatever. The language is often optimized for local registers, meaning that it's very quick for the language while it's running a function to find your variable, continue, it's local. If you were to do something like self or screen, it actually has to walk up the chain. It's like a string chain or a prototype chain or, an object chain, right? It has to find that particular variable, and it has to find the references in RAM and count. It's just a long walk, right? Locals allow you to get a quick pointer to it that's direct, and it speeds up your code execution. So it may seem redundant at first, but that's why a lot of times people have, stuff like this is valid, right? I want to use the image 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's good. Here, we're probably just going to go self.continue button equals continue, right? And I mean, that's, just to be specific, we can do that as well. But at least in later, it gives you the flexibility to add additional things to continue button if you had to. Does that make sense? So it's just something to know about Lua optimization. Premature optimization is, in fact, the root of all evil. However, things like this are okay to do, right? They eventually become second nature for you. And it also makes your code more readable instead of doing this versus self.continue button dot blah, 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 right? And also, you can't define a function like self.image, versus just image touch, right? So it has convenience as well. All right, so that's our continue button. Our next up is our new and about. I'm going to do these a lot faster. Ready? Go. New button equals self. Get button to our factory function. New ping. Self.new button equals new button. Okay. I think it was about, right? About. I think it was button about, sorry. Okay, self dot. Good to go. Now to initialize this mofo, we'll go screen, initialize. Now, this is a point of contention or debate. You can have classes initialize themselves so they actually do the work. So it's easy for the consumer, aka you actually utilizing your main screen, or one of your friends, or one of your peers, colleagues, etc. Or you can package it inside and say, look, I've made the class as easily debuggable as possible, but I've also made it easily usable as possible. So to me, this is the best of both worlds. It has all the initialization only called one time inside of the actual constructor, but at the same token, the functionality is broken down. Initialize creates things, get button is a factory function, show handles actually showing it, and hide, right? It's a little organized, but yet the consumer, all they have to do is instantiate main screen, right? So it's up to you. It depends on how you want to handle it. I don't really care. That's how I do it. All right, so let's test stuff. Let's do a local function on the global root called, and I do this a lot. I'll write a bunch of test functions at the bottom of my main to make sure that my GUIs work, because it's really hard to write unit tests for like visual design elements, but believe it or not, having them be testable with the ability to test them again later in isolation is very, very helpful as your game or app gets bigger and bigger, okay? So let's call it test main screen. We'll actually do the require, which isn't completely clean, but it's clean enough. So do the require inside of the main. And the reason this isn't like completely clean is because the way I do modules, you'll notice there's no module CL at the top here. So what this means is that when I do require, this mofo is shoved on global, aka _G. And it's, there's no real easy way to get rid of it, like in a nice clean fashion. So just because I'm doing this in a local function on root and only define it inline, it's basically still importing it and shoving it on global scope, right? But for the most part, you don't have a lot of libraries and things like that have collisions like you do in JavaScript, okay? So it's not that bad. So we're going to import main screen, and then I'm going to create it. Main screen equals new. Just kidding. Equals main screen new. All right. If this works, we should see a main screen in the top left. If it doesn't, we'll see nothing. Ready? Here we go. There we go. Cool. So we got our buttons, but you'll notice that they are not positioned at all. So let's handle that right now. In our show, we'll reinitialize everything here. Let's get a reference to some of these guys, okay? So we'll say self dot. Notice I use dot notation for actually getting access to properties and things of that nature. New button. About button. Okay. Cool. So we have references to them in the show. Let's initialize them where they belong. Okay. By the way, nice little plugin you can get for Corona if you hit, Sublime. If you hit, I think it's Alt Control. Align. If you don't have it, you can. The easiest way to do things is let's see, Command Shift P. If you have the install package control plugin, you hit install. It'll show up there. You hit enter. Then I think it should be V-Align. Yeah, if it's not installed, you'll see it there. You just hit enter. It'll do this little loading thing. Good to go. Then you should be able to Control Command A. Yeah, there you go. So it keeps everything aligned. You can do the same thing here. There you go. See? Nice and aligned. Easily readable. Blah, blah, blah. All right. So let's do some transitions to bring these mofos in, okay? First up, I want you to be in the center of whatever I am in terms of size. So we're going to assume that all of these screens for now are going to match what the size of the device that they're on, okay? So they're going to be somewhat centered. They're going to be somewhat towards the top. So we're going to get a global reference to stage here in our constructor function. And we'll say display.getCurrentStage, display.getCurrentStage. There we go. So this reduces the amount of typing, self.stage. Okay. Let's position everything in the middle of the screen, okay? So we'll say content, well, we'll just say width for now to keep it simple, minus the continue button's width divided by 2. And then new button, X equals stage width divided by 2, or we could just say stage middle, right? The whole thing of dry, don't repeat yourself. So we'll say stage middle. So we'll have to do the division once. Divided by 2, about button, minus. Okay, cool. So let's make sure everything lines up. We'll test our main screen. Now we'll go main screen.show. Cool. Now, the reason they're aligning in the middle there is because the alignment for Corona's default display object is actually in the center, unlike, I don't know, a lot of other things I've used, such as Flash, where it's in the top left. So let's fix that. We'll go into our factory function, and thankfully everybody used a factory function, so we only have to fix it in one place. How convenient is that? Set display, I think it was set, is it set reference point? I think it's reference point. Set reference point, display.top left reference point. Okay, there we go. Now, everything's centered in the middle of the phone. Good to go, Funky Comadina. Now let's transition these guys. First up, they need to be invisible. How do you make things invisible? The easiest way is alpha equals 0. Copy pasta. new, about, save. Cool, can't see them. Now, let's get some tween going. So, tweens, or transitions, typically will return a reference to the actual tween object. If you keep a reference to that, you can turn it off, you can cancel it, you can abort it, and it tends to be, at least from what I'm used to, keeping a reference to those tweens somewhere. The easy and quick and dirty way is to keep a reference to the thing that's been animated on the thing that's been animated. So, for example, the continue button will have a tween to show it and alpha it in, right? So we're going to keep a reference to that tween on the continue button. So if we ever have to interrupt that tween or make a new tween, we know where to find the old one to cancel it and stop it, so we don't have animations overriding each other and freaking out, okay? So we'll go continue button, tween. First, make sure it doesn't actually have one. If continue button tween does not equal to nil, then it has one. So let's transition. Learn how to type, Jesse. There you go. Transition cancel, and we'll say continue button to tween. Cancel. Cool. And we'll do this for every other one, just to be nice, clean, consistent, hygienic, psychosomatic, attic insane, bring pressure. All right. Tween equals transition 2. All right, good old transition 2. Transition, in this case, the object we're affecting is continue button. How much time is it going to take? We're going to do half a second. I like 300, but 500 is good enough for ScreenFlow to actually capture enough animation that you can actually see. The properties we are animating. Well, let's fade them in first. So we'll do alpha to 1. Alpha inside of Corona uses a float from 0 to 1. Float, also known as decimal point, also known as 0 point, all the way to 1. 0 means you can't see it. 1 means you can see it. So it'll tween from whatever its current value is to 1 over the course of half a second. When it's complete, do something. This is where I like to use closures. I think it's just easier to actually define them in line here. So what we'll do is we'll say continue button. And this is where we're going to start having problems with dry. So let's do this. We'll go screen, cancel, tween, object. And we'll say if object, no parentheses, we're not in JavaScript. If object.tween does not equal nil, then object transition cancel. No, not from, transition cancel. There you go. Object.tween. Then object.tween equals nil. So we actually get rid of the reference, so it never has to cancel it ever again. Okay? Then we can take all this code and change it to self.cancel tween, continue button. Then we can copy and paste it, put new, put about, and get rid of all this insanity with if and statements and blah, blah, blah. A lot cleaner. Isn't that cleaner? Yes, Jesse, it's cleaner. We get it. All right, cool. I'm glad you get it. So then we'll go screen, cancel tween, continue button. And since this is a closure, it still has reference to the execution context of this function. Also known as screen is actually, in fact, screen when this function runs, and continue button is in fact continue button when this function runs after the end of the tween. I know it's a bunch of gobbledygook, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. Seriously. All right, do the same thing for new button, boink, 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 and do the same thing for about button. All right, so let's review. We've done a lot of code changes here. The first thing we did was initialize everything to 0, so you can't see it. Additionally, if they have an existing tween when we call the show, we want to cancel it. We don't know how many or how often people who are using our screen could call show. Maybe their code is buggy. We don't want to put the burden on them. We want to make sure, look, if you call show way too many times, don't worry about it. We'll still work. We'll do the best we can for you to make us part of, not the problem, but part of the solution. You don't have to worry about fixing us. Just worry about fixing your code calling show too many times, okay? Cool. So we'll cancel the tweens if there's any going. If they're trying to fade out from 0 to everything else, we'll do that. And one thing we should probably do is put it before we initialize everything. Number 2, now that everyone's invisible again, we're ready to go and do our transitions of fading in. Number 3, we put a tween. We get a reference to it. Remember, transition 2 returns a tween object. It's just a pointer to a transition. That's all it really is. And it in this case, does an alpha tween from 0 to 1 over the course of half a second. When it is completed, it'll call this simple closure that just says, hey, cancel the tween for continue or new or whatever else, right? So when it's done, even though the transition is in fact done, it'll actually kill the tween, which is good. We don't want to keep references to tweens if we're not actually if we're done animating. So we have the tween clean up its own mess when it's done. That's pretty helpful, pretty useful. One less thing to worry about, right? I don't have to nil it like I do down here. I have to manually nil it, okay? Now again, you don't have to do this kind of stuff. It's just good practice. I know that learning coding is hard enough. Learning animation via code is hard enough. When you're used to tools doing this for you and things such as Unity and 3D Studio Max and all those others, but in Flash, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, it's just a good practice. You'll eventually be glad you did, okay? Cool. So it's hard to see if it's actually transitioning in or not. It's kind of long. So let's put a constant right here for now, a local constant, and we'll call it transition in time, and we'll make it 2 seconds, okay? Or 2 times 1,000 milliseconds. And we'll put it here so we don't have to change it in 3 different places. So now you should be able to see them. There you go. A little easier. Let's make it 4. Maybe I don't know how fast screen flows. Cool. All right, so let's change it back to half a second. Now, let's make them fly down on the screen. So it kind of like is somebody who had a packet of cards and they threw them on a desk and they slid into place, right? Kind of like a move like X-Men or a Gambit from the X-Men would do. So we'll give it a target that constantly increases. So let's give it a start Y, also known as a start Y position. So 0, it starts at Y. Let's make it 20, so it's kind of like not exactly on the top of the screen. And let's do 40. Okay. So the start Y is 40, and we'll say our Y position equals start Y. Cool. Continue slid into place. Next, let's increase that each time we do a tween by the continue button's height plus another 40. Why not? Then, so we're taking the start position, which is 40. Continue button will go to that. We're going to increase it and then say, hey, new button, go to the position we moved down. And we're going to keep moving it down. So every button goes down a few pixels, okay? Now, we're not increasing the transition time. They all take the same transition time. I'll show you how to delay things in a bit so we can actually choreograph some pretty sophisticated screen animations here. So let's do a Y equals start Y, just like we did it above. Now watch this. Cool. Okay, not bad. You can see it slide into place. Now let's do it again. Copy pasta. Notice if you copy pasta, things start to happen. You get something called a pattern. A pattern or redundant code is a candidate for what? Boys and girls, dry. That's right. Don't repeat yourself. However, I'm not going to do it right now because I'm lazy, but you'll notice that I keep making things smaller, make them in little utility functions that have very specific jobs. The tween function, the cancel tween function, the factory function, things like that, right? You could probably eventually, put this in some kind of function as well. But whatever. We're still playing. We're having fun. We want to keep it flexible. We don't want to encapsulate it yet because we're not done. Okay? So we'll make the last one start Y. I'm sorry. The last one's target Y position equals start Y, which we've increased yet again. Cool. Okay. Couple problems. First thing you'll notice is they all go at the same time. That's a little ghetto fab. Let's slow them down a little bit. So there's a delay property, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back to the docs and look at transitions. Right there, they got a delay property right down here. Go to 2. It's actually a parameter, excuse me. So it's delayed. Now we can stagger each subsequent. There we go. Definitely an S word. Subsequent tween to go a little bit later than the previous. So let's do that. We're going to start another local constant called, let's just call it delay, because that's effectively what it is. So we'll give it another half-second delay, okay? Now this is where it gets tricky and you get to tweak things. So notice how the delay and the transition time are both the exact same. That means that it takes exactly half a second for the first tween to finish. If I delay the second to the delay time, that means it'll start immediately when this one is complete. you get into some funky scenarios when like this is 600 and this is 400 and vice versa. So you need to play with these, and that's okay. That's part of, as an artist, trying to find what you perceive as a good looking transition that actually solves the either A, the look and feel you're going for, or maybe the transition has a purpose. You're trying to bounce the continue button after the screen is deployed. Say, hey user, I get you see the screen, but you really need to pay attention to this button now, right? So these kind of things you want to tweak, you want to play with, you don't want to dry just yet, okay? So let's put a delay in there on the second tween and the third tween. Delay equals delay. Hey, how convenient is that, huh? What does delay equal? Delay? No, I know, but the delay value of delay. It equals delay. No, I know, but the delay value. You get the point. All right, let's increase it down here because we've actually used it again. So we'll say delay equals delay plus 500. There we go. Looks like burger time. Remember that from the Atari? Most of you are probably too young. That's okay, though. All right. Not bad. It's a little too slow, but it's a little choppy. The buttons just go cha-chunk, cha-chunk. So let's easeify it. So let's look at easing real quick if you're not familiar. There are a significant amount of easing functions. All they are is a function or parameter. You don't actually have to memorize what they do. In fact, I guarantee most of you will probably stick to one easing function for the rest of your career, just like me and every other Flash developer know. Out expo. What that means is it's called out exponentially. It is basically like a geometry function that makes it nice and smooth looking. So let's put that in there. So let's say the easing for every single one is easing out expo, okay? Here's what it does. It makes it slow down at the very end to a nice soft stop. So let's see what it does. Oh, we got an error. I put it not in the brackets because I'm stupid. There we go. There we go. Not so bad. Let's slow the delay down just a tad. Let's try, or I'm sorry, speed it up. Let's try 300 milliseconds. Let's try 100 milliseconds. Let's try the transition time of being 300 milliseconds. All right, so I think this needs to be increased by 300. Let's try 100 and then 100. 200. Boom, boom, boom. Let's try 300 and 300. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Yes, a lot better. I like that. A lot better. Okay. Maybe we can increase it just a tad. Let's see what happens. A little smoother. Okay, not bad. Let's try 500 again. Yeah, I'm going to have to try 600. This is where I get anal retentive. All right. So that is our fade in. Now, we can call show as many times as we want, and it'll automatically reset and cancel the tweens. This is what happens when you create a nice screen that's safe internally. You don't care how show works. You just know that you can call it 50 billion times, and it'll worry about, dude, why are you calling show in the transitions? You know what? I don't care why you're not calling it. I'll fix it for you. You're obviously a cracker who doesn't know how to code. I'll fix it, right? So I call show twice. It still works. Fantastic. No errors, right? Pretty cool. All right, so that's show. Now, what does hide do? Our hide is not going to remove things from memory beyond the tween. It's just going to hide them or do a transition out. If you're familiar with Gaia in Flash, not Gaia the game, Gaia the website creation tool, our hide is going to do something very similar. So let's copy and paste some of this code. Now, we're going to assume that if you call hide, you've already called show. I'm not going to set things up for you. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to transition everything out. So let's copy each one of these, and we'll transition them down. So we'll put a local target Y or end Y, and we'll say it is at the bottom of the screen. So we'll go stage.height plus 40. Let's put it a little bit below what the current stage height is. Keep in mind, height and content height are a little different than what they might be on the device, especially with games that are scaled up. So just, you might have to play with this when you actually test on different devices. There's ways of actually drawing on the root a rect or a rectangle, a red rectangle around what the content height is. So if you actually have any black letterboxing around your content, which might actually be here, this might be considered the bottom of the device. The rest is actually like letterboxed, that your button will kind of disappear into this blackness. So just be aware, weird things like that might happen if you use height versus content height and you're not aware of the differences, as well as where your stage is actually positioned, as well as whatever your config is set to, okay? So hopefully you're confused by now. All right. So in this case, we're going to make sure that we cancel our tweens, just like we did here. Now, we don't care if you're done or not. We're just going to transition you with an easing out to the NY, okay? In the transition in time, we're going to have a new one called transition out time. Let's copy the transition. Yeah, let's copy all of them. Why not? We're gonna have some different constants. Play around with them. We're gonna make it a little bit quicker this time. The delay's a little bit quicker as well. We don't need a start Y because we already have an end Y. So our transition in time is not really transition in. It's actually transition out. So we'll change that. You could leave it transition in, but we're trying to be thorough here in terms of code readability. You should be able to read it and understand it, as well as if you're trying to debug it, why is transition time used twice, even though it's a local variable, right? Makes sense? And then our target alpha is 0, so it's going to fade out all of them to the bottom of the screen. And when it's done, it does the exact same thing, and that is cancel the current tween and clean up the mess, okay? So we're going to use a little trick called create a table, give it a timer callback. We don't really care about the event. Say timer perform with delay. I hate when it does that. Perform with delay. Can't remember the parameter order, so let's try it. I think it's t comma after 2 seconds, and then it'll do it one time by default. Then we'll say inside when the timer fires, which should only fire one time, we'll say main screen.hide. So it'll show. 2 seconds later, it'll call hide, and that's it. Ready? Here we go. Wow, that worked fantastic. If you don't know if it worked, let's test it. Hello, timer. Oh, doesn't look like it. So instead of being lazy, I'm going to RTFM because I don't have this memorized, even though I use this function. What, boys and girls? That's right, all the time. The first parameter is delay. The second is listener. What did Jesse do? He did it backwards. Delay is first, listener second. Doo-doo-doo. All right, cool. So we know what fires, we got an exception. So let's figure out why we got an exception. It's not main, it's main screen. Nice try, buddy. Get rid of our print. Now it's going to work fantastic. All right, one worked, but not the other. All right, so our start Y is not what we're using. We're using end Y. So let's get rid of all this stuff. We don't need this. We don't need this. Well, yeah, we can keep the delay, but we don't need it that much. We can keep the delay 100 milliseconds because it's already pretty quick, right? So our target is NY, NY, NY. Good. Let's try it again. Doom. And then boom, boom, boom. All right. So nice and slow in, and then boom, boom, boom. Fantastic. So that's show and hide. So that is our screen. Now, let's make a new screen and transition from one screen to the other. So when I click About on the main screen, I want to show the About screen, okay? So we're going to create an About screen. I'm going to do this one a lot more quickly with less explanation because it's the exact same class we already did with a little few different buttons. Going to create our constructor function. Going to create our screen instance. Return our screen instance from our constructor function. Don't you like how... Never mind. I won't get into that. Screen show. Screen hide. Screen initialize. Let's grab some buttons. All right, what does our about screen look like? I've completely forgotten. Go. Look, it has a back button, and it has an image. Okay. So let's go back button equals, and we'll copy and paste code because I'm a lazy mofo. Whoosh. Now notice we're not handling button touch yet. I'll get to that, okay? I know some of you are like, wait a minute, why didn't he cover that? I'm getting there. The good thing about Lua is that it can call things and not throw exceptions, unlike other languages which go, oh my god, it's the berg. All right. Actually, they go, oh my god, type error, but whatever. And this is why we use self, because we can copy and paste functions, and for the most part, they usually work. Pretty neat, huh? All right. So back button equals self.getButton. It's button back dot ping. Okay, and the last one is the image, and this is not really a button. This is just an image. So it is a, we'll just call it about image. Display dot new image. Nice try, you code hint. Silly code hint. Ugh. Yeah, the code hints in Sublime need some work. They're not as good as IntelliJ, but the problem is IntelliJ, I've yet to get compiling Lua on a Mac. John Lindquist a long time ago got it on the PC, but I never could figure it out. All right, so new image, screen about ping, and we'll say self.aboutImage, about image. And if you change our mind later, we could get rid of these, but for now, I'm just doing it like this. Okay, that looks good. Let's call initialize, screen.initialize. Let's verify our screen looks good. Test about screen. Require about screen. Local screen equals about screen new. Mr. Bottom size machine, go. And let's call the correct test function. Test about screen. Comment out the other one. Plut out. Okay, got our images. Everything's good. Now let's position these things. Back button should be a kind of like, I would say, about 8 to 8 on the top left. And then the about image should kind of be, let's for now just assume it's going to be in the middle. So we'll do a stage. Actually, let's get a reference to stage, make this easier. Display.get current stage. And we'll say, oh, doesn't like that. Did I misspell it again? Yeah, I always misspell it. It's not display, it's display. Can you tell I miss France? I miss Paris. Oh, what a great town, dude. I can't eat that much white bread, but the coffee there was amazing. The people were amazing. I miss France so much. Sorry, what was I doing? Coding, right? Sorry, I'm reminiscing about such a wonderful time in my life. All right. Let's put it in the middle. We'll say about image is stage width divided by 2 minus our width divided by 2, and then we'll put it, let's try about 80. Let's just throw it there and see what she looks like, because I think that'll work. Okay, and what's it mad about now? Attempt to access global stage. Because it is global, you silly goose. Local stage equals self.stage. Alright, and then the last thing is fix our about image. Display top left reference point. Go. Let's do 140. That's a lot better. Fantastic. All right. So that is our about screen. So we're going to fade this guy in our show. And let's just copy a function we know we're going to use again, which is the cancel tween, because it's a very convenient function to have. Convenient function, man. It's convenient. It helps you do things when you're coding Corona SDK. Alright, so we'll say about button we'll say about button tween. It's not about button, you crackhead. It's actually back button. There we go. Transition 2 is our back button. The time is, should only take about 500 milliseconds to do that. The X, let's put the X at the 8. Yeah, that sounds about right. And the complete function is just our simple closure, which goes screen cancel tween, back button. Don't forget the end, because that'd be blasphemy if you forgot it. Ugh, I hate when it does that. There we go. Okay. And we'll copy it for the, let's see. So that gets our about screen to show. Let's make sure it does that. Let's delay that about, let's delay it about 700 milliseconds. So after about half a second, it'll tween in. And in fact, let's make sure that the back button starts at, how far do we want it to move? Only a few pixels. So let's try 20. See what it does. Test it out. Show. 1. There we go. Let's make it transition a little bit. What was it? Easing? I forgot the, easing out expo. Easing out expo. And don't worry about all this parameters crap. You'll memorize all this. You do enough tweens, man, I'm telling you, these are just going to flow right out of your brain. You're going to be like, wow, I memorized all this stuff. And that's, it's part of what software development is for a lot of these SDKs, just for memorizing the actual APIs. And I know some of this for a lot of y'all is in your spare time, but trust me, even in your spare time it comes, okay? So after half a second, it fades in, right? Now there's some other ways that might be helpful, such as a bounce, like we'd have this bounce against the side. It might be a little more obvious to the user. There's other easings that are included with a third-party library that a friend of mine, Josh Tingela, wrote a while back. He ported some of the Grant Skinner, who wrote a tweening engine for Flash called G-Tween. He had some pretty cool easings like bounce and things like that. So Josh Tingela converted it to work with Corona inside of Lua, and it has some pretty cool transitions. The syntax is slightly different, though. That's the only thing that's a little frustrating, but learning it is not that hard. It's almost the exact same as this. And some of it can be used back and forth, but you should really follow what Josh did because he's got a pretty good self-contained API. So if you go back, you look at easing. There's linear and things like that, but he has a bounce, which is good. But I'm not going to implement that. But anyway, you get what it's trying to do, okay? And then our about screen, about image, excuse me, we want it to fade in over the course of, I would say, it's kind of big, so let's say a second. Okay, 1 second. The value is an alpha of 1. Let's make sure it starts at 0 every single time. And the complete function is a cleanup function to clean up our mess about screen. Whoa, new line, bro. Screen.cancel tween about image. So when our tween is done, it cleans up its own mess. Everyone's happy. Everyone's joyous. They're raving till dawn. Got their pacifiers. All right, let's increase the delay a tad here because you saw that it actually went after the transition. So let's try 1 second and 300 milliseconds. So that fades in, and then the back button moves. Not bad, not bad. All right, cool. So that's our about screen. The only thing left is to get rid of things. So when it hides, we'll do the exact opposite. And that is, we will make the back button fade out. They're all doing out expo. We'll make it fade out really quickly. There is no delay. It's going to go at the exact same time as the image. So we'll say 300 milliseconds. Instead of the X to 8, we want the alpha to 0. The complete function is the exact same. It's just going to clean up itself, clean up its mess. The about image is going to take also 300 milliseconds to transition from an alpha of whatever it is to 0, completely invisible, and clean up its mess, okay? So let's do the exact same trick we did up here. Copy pasta. and we'll say screen hide after 2 seconds. 1, 2, boom. Cool. All right, fades out. Nice and clean and good to go, funky comedina. Now, how do you transition between screens? So, at this point, you'd start following the storyboard API on your existing screens if you have any, or you would implement your own. Now, here's the challenge. You'll notice that when I create displays, these are all in the group or local kind of thing. And so you can't really move the about screen because it's just an object, right? So let's do screens how you're supposed to do them and actually create them as visual display components. So the about screen is now going to actually be a physical thing. So I'm going to say display, new group, okay? And anytime we create anything, which is where, boys and girls, just the initialize, right? We don't have to look. We know exactly where to go. We're going to put it as soon as we create it. Like, I'm talking the first time. We're going to go screen, insert, back button. Okay? And we'll do the same thing after we correct its reference here. So, and we'll to be oop people, good ivory tower oop people. We use self instead of screen. Cool. Nice portable function. Now, we don't remove anything or kill anything, so it's all we've done is make it a group and injected things within us, okay? And it doesn't like my equals on line 21 because I need to learn how to code. Sorry about that. Someday I will learn. Oh, I'm sorry. That's in main. Whoops. Sorry. That happens sometimes. So class still works, but now it's inside of a group. So we're going to do the exact same thing to our main screen and make him be a group. New group. Okay, and we're going to insert each one of these. Now, all these buttons come from factory functions, so we only have to do it in one place. Nice, convenient, good to go. Now, notice self refers to screen. Screen is now a group. He has group functions such as insert and remove. We can insert the buttons inside of themselves. And to verify that it still works, we'll use our regression testing test functions, which verify our views work in isolation. We can test just the main screen or just the about screen to see if it still works after we make changes to it. How convenient! Oh my god, it's awesome! Love it. All right, so they both work. They're now groups. Cool. Let's make 2 screens and transition to them. Now, how do we do that? Well, the first thing is the screen has to tell us, yo, dog, go to another screen, like right now. What does that mean? What is that language? That's not Ebonics. That is events. So let's talk about events. What are events? Events are anything that a display object can do, or the runtime. So you can either dispatch events from a specific object, in this case touch, right, on a simple object. We can listen for it via the object itself. Say, hey, whenever somebody touches on you, let me know and call this function. So anytime this function is called, on button, no touch will fire. You can also use the runtime. So let's start with individual images first. We'll implement the callback function of on button touch, and we'll print what was touched. Target is event.target. And this is for the about screen, so we'll uncomment the about screen and see if that worked. Cool, I touched the about. So let's put some code in here. You don't have switch statements, but we do have ifs. So if the event.target equals the self.back button and the phase is I forget the phase. It's been a while. Phase. What's the phase? Event.phase. Oh, it's not audio, you silly goose. Hit back. Event.phase. It's not audio, it's not collision, it's not connect, it's not key, it's sprite. No, it's not sprite. It's touch, sorry. We are looking for the, not began. Yes, began. All right, so as soon as the user touches it, that's what we want to know, is when they touched it. It began. There we go. Okay. If the phase is began, then self dot. Now, we have 2 choices here. We can do it self, so it'll specifically fire from the about screen, or we can do runtime and make it a global event. To make things easy, I'm going to use runtime. Now, I encourage you to use self for these kind of things. because it makes your code testable and more portable. But I understand that we're on deadlines. We don't have time to worry about, event bubbling and OOP and all this encapsulation BS that Jesse rants about. So let's just use runtime and call it a day. So we'll say dispatch event. We'll give it a name of about screen back button touched. The target is screen, and we're going to call it a day. Now, for now, if you handle something like this, you handle touch, you're supposed to return true. You don't have to do that. It gets a little complicated with multiple button presses, but don't worry about it. All you care about is when we touch something, we dispatch an event that we can actually listen for, okay? I want to know when you touch the back button. I need to know. So let's take off our timer. Oh, too much JavaScript. And let's listen for it. Screen. Just kidding. Runtime. Add event listener. And we'll call... let's just call closure for right now. Print. Dude, you touched the back button. End. There we go. Dude, you touched the back button. Dude. All right. Cool. So now we know that we can actually touch the back button. Fantastic. Let's do the exact same thing to the main screen, but with a longer on-button touched handler. So here we go. Screen. Event. We'll do runtime as well to keep it simple. Okay. If the event, let's get the phase as a local because we're going to be using it a lot. Get the target because we're going to be using it a lot as well. If target, let's just say if phase equals began, then run the entire loop. Okay. If the target equals the self.continue button, then runtime dot, just kidding, colon, dispatch events. The name is continue button touched. Target is screen. And then we will copy this entire thing. Else if. And the way else ifs work in Corona is they're single name word things. Else if self.continue button. Otherwise, is it the new button? Otherwise, is it the about button? Learn how to code, Jesse. Fantastic. Now, it's not continue button touched. It's new button touched. It's not continue button touched. It's about button touched. Okay, so we have 3 unique events that we've added that will be dispatched on the runtime. Okay. Then we'll say return, because obviously something was touched. Return true. And let's test those mofos out. Now remember, it's the button touched. New button touched, about touched, right? Those are the event or conventions I follow for events. Let's go to main screen. Comment out our timer tester. And we'll go main screen. Add event listener. Continue button touched. We'll say touch handler. And we'll make it touch handler so you don't have to do it 5 times. Local touch handler equals function E. Learn how to spell function, Jesse. Woo. Print. Name. What is the name of the event? Who was touched? I need to know these things. It's not main screen, it's runtime. Because we're doing global to make it simple for people. Doesn't matter where it's dispatched from, doesn't matter where it's added a listener from, it'll work. That's what's great about runtime. He's global, he's the man, he's an event bus, he's action jackson. Continue, about, and new. Okay. Good to go. Alright. Continue button was touched, new button was touched, and about button was touched. Fantastic. So we know exactly what button was touched on what particular screen. Unfortunately, it's global, so we don't know if it's the about screen or whatever. We can glean that these 3 are the main screen, and this one right here is the about screen back button touch, and a little more verbose. Okay, so let's create a link between the 2. Going to make a new test called local function test to screen transition. The whole point of this YouTube video that we're creating today. Copy pasta. Copy pasta. Local main screen equals main screen. New. Now, people who are epic will do lazy instantiation. What that means is they will not create everything at the get-go. They will only create something when it is needed and then add a initialization such as event handlers and things like that. And they do that lazily. If it's already created, they won't create it again, blah, blah, blah. Easy way to code. We're just trying to see if things work now. We're not trying to do optimization. We're just trying to learn, make sure our screens transition correctly, and that we've gotten the concept. So we're going to create everything at the get-go, which means we're going to create 2 screens at the get-go. And we're going to add event listeners for everything, and everything's going to be set up and ready to go, and there's no excuses for things not to work other than my inability to code. So we have main screen, we have about screen, they're both created, ready to go. We know the difference between the two. We're going to hide. We're going to say is visible equals false. I wish that was visible. Anyway, is visible is false. And we'll put it in like, I don't know, -9999. So there's no possible way to actually see it. Okay? So let's make sure we can create 2 screens and not have the world blow up. Because I'm not a big fan of worlds blowing up at all. Ta-da! Okay, here's the problem. So we got our main screen, but we need to have it transition in. So we'll do that. Main screen show. Main screen's good to go. Now, when we click the about button touched, we want to say on about button touched. What is that? That is a local handler. I don't really care about the event. Dude, really? You need to learn how to type function. I don't know what your deal is. When the user touches the about button, we want to transition out the main screen and then show the about screen. Now, there's a correct way to handle this through this event, but I'm going to make it simple for you. We're going to use timers for now. You shouldn't ever, 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 ever do this. But I'm showing it to you anyway so you understand how to do it, and you learn the wrong way, and you understand why it's wrong, so you learn to have appreciation for doing it the right way and appreciate the hard work involved and recognize why you're doing it. Oh my God, I sound like an adult. What the heck's going on? So we're going to say, when the about button is touched, we're going to go main screen.hide, and then we're going to transition the other things. So let's make sure that this works first. So it's transitioned in. We click the about button. Oh, didn't work. Why not? Because we didn't do the right event. Touch. Learn how to spell. All right. So anytime I touch it, the about button, it knows the transition. So this means we can tell the difference between which button was clicked and do something specific for whenever we click on a specific button. In this case, about will hide it. What else is it going to do? It's also, in, let's say, 2 seconds, in 2 seconds, it will show the about screen. So we'll say about screen x equals 0, about screen y equals 0. Learn how to spell. Is visible true. And then about screen show. Timer perform with delay. Delay first, Jesse. Delay first. Timer second. Okay, here we go. Ready? Go. Pretty hot. Now there's a couple problems with this, but you can see that it did that. So let's keep going. Now that we have the about screen, we want to transition back to the other screen when it transitions out. So how do we handle that? Well, we do the exact same thing. We add a runtime listener, event listener for about screen back button touched. Thank God for code ends. And we'll say on back button touched. All right, what is a back button touch? Well, we're going to make a handler right now to handle that. Whoops. Touch equals function. And we'll do the exact same thing. About screen, hide. And then we'll say, does it work? Click about, transitions out, transitions in. I then click back, and it fades out. Fantastic. Now what? The same thing. Within 2 seconds, I would appreciate it if you'd make the about screen, the main screen. Where's the main screen? Main screen. The main screen show again. After 2 seconds. Ready, go. Now, it's a local a table inside of a function closure. So this T, since it has black scope, has nothing to do with these T. It's a completely unique table, okay? All right, so let's test it now that we've actually wired it up. We click About. Now, when we click the back button touched handler, fades it in. Now notice something interesting there. The buttons actually came from the bottom. The reason they did that is on main screen, we do set everything up from an X perspective, but we do not reset the Y perspective. So the transition goes from where they started, and that was at the very bottom of the screen. And if you remember, the start Y is at 40, but that doesn't mean that we've reset everything to where they originally were. It's okay. I like the effect. It looks like you're coming back, so I dig it. Okay. However, we're going to have a problem. Watch this. Notice the About screen is missing the back button. So how do we fix that? Well, that is something we can fix. We don't reset the back button's alpha here. That we can fix. So let's fix that. Back button alpha to 1. Now when we come back to the About screen, it reset its alpha, and it's good to go. Okay? Now this is a little unwieldy, a little bit. The other problem with timers is that these don't really work very well on all devices consistently. Some animations may take longer or may not display correctly or whatever, and some tablets might actually take longer to move the object, even though it's set exactly 2 seconds. This is not an exact science, okay? This number, it's about 2 seconds. It's not 2 seconds. So sometimes you can get into situations where it could finish early. It's just the way it is. You don't know what else the device is doing. Your app could be running with other applications that are doing things in the background. A phone call could happen. Really anything. So the correct way is to handle events. The problem is that we don't know when these things are done hiding, right? That's what we care about, is when you're done hiding, let me know so I can tell my friend here to start transitioning in or show. So let's add some events so we actually do know what the heck. So if you look at the bottom here, the last thing to actually transition out on the main screen is the About button. So when it's done canceling the tween, we're going to dispatch a brand new event on the runtime, and we're going to call it main screen hidden, and the target is screen. And we're going to listen for it. And then on the About screen, we're going to do the same thing. When the About image, when he goes away, when he fades out, even though there's two things, we only really care about both. We'll just get rid of him. We'll say dispatch event. The name is About screen hidden, going with the convention. And the target is screen. Now we're going to comment out all this whack handler code and blah blah code with a block comment right here. The first thing we need to know, when the user clicks the About screen touched, we want to main screen hide it. And that's it. That's all I want to do. Step 1, hide the main screen. Cool. Step 2, when the main screen is fully hidden, then we're allowed to show the About screen. Now we have to do some prep work for the About screen, obviously. We need to set them up. We only have to do this once, but for now I'm just going to do it every time. It's not going to hurt anything. Remember, he was off the screen and invisible. And that's it. Cool. See, it's a lot more quick and reactive that time. Okay. Now, when we click the back screen, same as before, when the About button is touched, we're going to use closures here, so it's all in line. When the About button is touched, we want to hide the About screen. Not About button touched, you silly goose. It's actually the About screen back button touched. Sorry about that. And this goes here. Whoops, little bug. Let me fix that. Very bottom here. We're going to delay him by, I don't know, I'd say 10 milliseconds. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. And last but not least, when the About screen is completed, going hidden, then we can show the main screen. See how that works? It's a choreograph of event handlers, basically. So a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier to understand than all this callback timer mess. But it's also a lot more tight because we're listening for events, okay? So this is the API. Now it's global, but we could actually add it to the objects. It doesn't really matter at this point. But that's basically how it goes down, okay? The only thing we're really missing is why did we add them in the groups in the first place? It's so you can do certain things like this. Let's position everything when it's ready to show to be in the correct place, okay? We already do it for the About screen, and we now do it for the main screen. So before we call show on anything, we make sure it's nice and in place. Let's do something unique when it's hidden. When we hide it, let's move it slightly off the screen to the right, just slightly, okay? So say transition in, or transition to, the main screen. It'll take about 500 milliseconds to go, let's do it to 100. And let's make the alpha to 0. And I'm not going to clean up my tween because I'm an irresponsible coder. Don't tell anybody. Assume they'll still hire me. And just to make sure the alpha's good, we'll reset it every time he comes in. Okay, we'll do the same thing for About screen. And we'll take that exact same tween when we hide the About screen. Now you'll notice I'm just tweening the X property of the screen because it's now a group. It'll move everything as a group. Pretty dope, huh? All right, check it out. Here we go. If you get into situations where strange things happen, it's always sometimes a good idea to cancel your tweens and your hide just in case, and your show, to basically abort any of those tweens that may be going. So I'm going to do that at least in the show because we're not really concerned so much about the hides, but if you start in the show and clean up in the show, then you can clean up in the hides as well. So we'll go cancel tween. Back button and cancel tween About image. Yeah, it looks good. But anyway, you can see how it fades in, fades out, and goes off screen and all that jazz. Right, and this is kind of the point of groups, is that they give you this kind of flexibility to set X and Y's of the entire thing. So you can transition the screens while you're transitioning other things. I'm alphaing the entire screen even though it has alphas internally. You can do some pretty funky stuff, and it gets really interesting when you start choreographing screens within screens. This is where video compositing and whatnot experience comes into play, because you can time certain transitions of a screen before you actually transition off the screen, so you can get some really cool things. It takes a lot of play. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It definitely takes a while to get the effect you want sometimes. A lot of times it's just easier to do it in Flash and say, all right, that's what I want, or After Effects, and then duplicate that in code. But anyway, that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you do screen transitions in Corona. My name is Jesse Warden. You can contact me on Twitter, contact me on Google+, Facebook. You can ask me questions in the comments. Send me an email at jesse@discentwarden.com. You should definitely subscribe. I always do either JavaScript or Corona videos. And this code is actually all on GitHub, so if you want to tear it apart or fork it or whatever, please do so. Also, my company, Web App Solution. We're a growing firm. We do staff augmentation, consulting, application development, design, deployment for usually enterprises. We tend to do large implementations, multi-man teams. So check us out, see our work, see what we've done, hire us, buy us free beer. Be amazing. So thanks for your time.